our coverage here on Facebook. The voters are speaking here. I'm Pat.
Williams, thanks so much for coverage on Facebook. Voters came to the polls about average
off your election.
Year. Yeah. Boy, oh boy, were they amazing. The picture in the game this early in the game. So right now you're from the question that asked if there's a casino in with 50. It is a 84 to 6.
Those are roughly the same number. 8% of the vote.
So those are
no. The statewide are flipped, and we apologize. In fact, voters in the York County casino fashioned blow check mark anymore. Yeah. The race for Medicaid question 2 has held steady all night. That ballot question Medicaid to less than 7 single or less than 20 a couple, and 32 stable over time, and voters are saying yes to this. There's no reason to think this will not pass.
It also brings us in line with what other states are doing as far as the amortization. Over 20 years instead of 10. In
the city of Portland, we have a very controversial question about whether there should be rent control for apartments in the city. We have 25% of the precincts reporting in Portland right now, a wide margin saying no to rent control, 70-30.
The argument there being that it was going to do the exact opposite, that it was actually going to result in less affordable housing. All right, on to the school renovation. A lot of people very passionate about this. This is the question to renovate 2 schools. They also had the option to renovate 4 schools, but this again, the 2 schools question, narrowly passing, but again, it's pretty early, only a quarter of the precincts reporting at this point.
Big city votes are slow to come in, so the 4 school question appears more popular right now. That is passing with 25% of the precincts reporting yes, leads no, 60-40.
Then on to Lewiston-Auburn. Big question there.
And the check mark is in the wrong place on this again.
Yes, it is.
But the numbers are correct. No is the Lewiston voters in both Lewiston and Auburn have said no, they don't want to merge their 2 cities, and they're saying it very decisively.
Very wide margin there. Moving on to the mayoral race, you're looking at the breakdown in a 5-person race. Ben Chen coming out on top with 42%. Shane Bouchard next at 29. Mark Kayer with 24. There's going to have to be a runoff here, right? Right,
because no one got 50% of the vote. There will be a runoff between the top 2 finishers, and that would be Ben Chen and Shane Bouchard.
Ben Chen was involved in a runoff in the last go-round, too,
so
and
he's
lost
familiar
that
with
one.
this.
So, yeah, he knows how this
before.
Process works.
So we also want to go now to all of our headquarters around the state, and we have we'll begin with Chris Costa, who has been covering the casino question. He's been with the Yes on One people all night, and that could not have been a happy place, Chris, when, as I mentioned, when we saw the first numbers come in, when we were at about 8% counted, which is usually statistically insignificant. In fact, that was the predictor of what was going to happen here. This was going down big.
Yeah, Pat, that really was the case. And Pat, yeah, it really is kind of a somber room here now, and it's cleared out quite a bit since Sean Scott came up at about 9:30 to address the crowd and kind of thank everybody for being part of the campaign. Obviously, let them know that the AP had called the election, as many other news outlets had also done. Said obviously the results were discouraging, not what they were hoping for, but that they were excited about the work they had done here and hope to continue that soon. No word exactly from him on what is next for him. We had hoped to get a comment from him, but he was not available. We did speak by text message with the campaign director or one of the campaign spokespeople for No on 2. He believes that the Maine voters made an informed decision. He called it a vindication of the Maine voter. So anyway, this room here kind of starting to clear out. The mood, like we said, disappointed in the results tonight, but you could, as you mentioned, a pretty good old-fashioned blowout on this one.
That's a remarkable outcome, Chris, when you consider how much money was spent on this. When you take into account they spent a lot of money to gather the signatures, then a lot of money to try to promote the question, well over $8 million. They outspent their opponents probably on a level of 7-1. That's what happened here at our television station. So that's a huge letdown for someone who invested that much money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is, and the ads were certainly part of an area of scrutiny, specifically by the No on One campaign. Many of the ads mentioned a gaming venue or a gaming facility, but never mentioned a casino by name. That was one thing that the No on One folks really clung on to and made sure to highlight, and it was something that Sean Scott had been asked about a lot in multiple interviews with the press.
Austin, Portland, thanks.
We're going to move on now to question 2, which was the question to expand Medicaid coverage in the state. Don Kerrigan is at the yes on 2, and they must be really happy there.
Hi, Cindy. A lot of happiness here at question 2. I'm here with Robin Merrill, co-chair of the Yes on 2 campaign, Mainers for Healthcare. You seem very happy.
I'm so ecstatic, so excited, not surprised.
Are you that was my question.
Not surprised. I mean, Maine people have spoken tonight, and they've said we want more affordable health care, not less.
Okay, all right. Ron, I know you need to go speak to the crowd, so thank you very much, and we'll hear from you in a few minutes. Thank you. Robin Merrill, the co-chair of the Question 2 campaign. They're about to speak to the crowd here, as we just mentioned. We'll have more on that coming up in a few minutes. Pat and Cindy, back to you.
All right. Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
In Portland, they have been talking about rent control for when the fight for affordable housing is a very real problem here in the city of Portland. And because of that, you had a strong strong movement, if you will, to impose rent controls so that people could perhaps they could afford to live in the city. An awful lot of people who want more affordable housing have said, this won't do it. We need affordable housing. This will not create any new units. It might leave some people who are in place there, but it's not going to let anybody else move in, and that's how the city has to grow. News Center's Vivian Lee is covering the rent control question tonight. Viv?
Right, I'm here with a lot of happy folks tonight here at the Rising Tide Brewing Company. I'm here with Britt Vitalius, who has been spearheading this campaign. What's the feeling right now?
Well, it's relief. It's relief that the message got out, and that we've got a resounding defeat. And Portland is saying no to rent control. They're saying yes to affordable housing and yes to the challenges that come with growth and change, but no to rent control and no to this proposal is the answer. We don't make housing policy here in Portland with a small group of activists. Housing policy is complicated. We all care about our tenants and safe housing. This is a terrible proposal, and I'm glad the message got out.
Unlike question 2, it doesn't seem to be as close as question 2. What is that telling you? Like really a lot of support.
You know, it tells me that the referendum process is really challenging, and I think we want to look at that next, frankly. We felt like we were fighting a slogan because fair rent sounds good. Of course, we all want rents to feel fair and be fair, but that's not what we were voting on tonight. And likewise with question 2. These are complicated things, zoning, and you know, it's not a great way to make law and make policy. We were organized early. I think question 2 got out a little later, and so they had a little more of an uphill battle.
Right, as you said earlier, as you guys were saying some celebratory remarks, the buck stops here, though. You guys should be the leaders of whatever movement that's going to be coming down the line for more affordable housing.
We had such a diverse coalition of people, really the leaders in the community, and not just the developers, but the affordable housing community, city councilors, past city councilors, contractors. We all love Portland. We're all helping build Portland, and it's not landlords against tenants. That's not the division. We're all here and love it. We're the leaders. We need to look forward and create smart policy. And it's happening now. And if you look at the city council, if you go to the housing committee, they're looking at things every day to embrace the city and to continue to deal with the challenges that are coming at us.
Do you think some of the leaders on the other side have been really pushing for rent control? This could begin a new dialogue, like you said, with all the parties involved.
You know, it's hard to say. There were some great intentions on the other side, but the more you looked at it, it was a pretty small group of very passionate folks, but it didn't seem like there was a broad coalition. The irony was the grassroots movement was actually against the rent control. When you looked at our rally in the park with over 200 people, those were the community leaders, from affordable housing and counselors and contractors and landlords and tenants. that's where the energy is. That's where we're making policy. So.
What kind of impact when you have the head of Avesta Housing, Dana Topman, who was here earlier, come out against question 1?
Well, it helps convey the message. I think the message was just as bad, but you're trying to get this message out to voters who are not necessarily thinking about tenant-landlord policy and rent control. This is kind of wonky stuff that not every homeowner is thinking about, not every voter is thinking about. But when you have a trusted leader like Dana Topman at Avesta and Colin Ryan at Chum and Shalom House coming out saying, you know what, we're for affordable housing and this is bad policy, it certainly helps make your message easier to get out.
Thank you very much, Britt Vitalius. Appreciate your time tonight. Again, a lot of celebrating going on here tonight. Back to you, Sydney and Pat.
All right, thank you, Vivian.
Vivian, thank you. People in Lewiston-Auburn were voting on whether or not to merge those two cities into one. The idea being they'd save a lot of money on administrative and various other costs if they were to do that. Christina Rex is at the No on LA merger, which handily defeated the folks who wanted to merge. They must be very excited, Christina.
Pat and Cindy, I think I'm in probably the most excited room in Lewiston and Auburn, if I had to guess. Everyone in here is very excited. We announced probably about half an hour ago or so. With me here, Jim, we talked to you a couple hours ago. How are you feeling now? It's definite.
Well, it feels great. It's been a long ordeal. We've been doing this for 3 years. We've been telling everybody that there was absolutely no support for this in Lewiston and Auburn, and that came to fruition tonight. We're just absolutely astounded at some of these numbers. It looks like Auburn came in for no at about 84% and about 2-to-1 against it in Lewiston. So obviously we're elated.
So you didn't realize it would be, that wide of a margin, did you?
Well, frankly, we saw that. A lot of our candidates who were going door to door were saying, geez, it looks like 1 or 2 out of every 10 is in favor of it. And you never believe that that's what's going to be the ultimate result, but that's what it was tonight. People just love their respective cities. They don't want to merge, and we've been trying to tell that to the other side. They spent some $300,000 to fund this initiative, and it was $300,000 wasted.
You had mentioned that. You gave a little speech to this room, had everyone pretty fired up, and you were pretty fired up saying, we don't want this to just be a no today. We want to not hear about this for the next 100 years, I believe is what you said.
We really wanted to send a message. We were afraid that if this thing, failed by some small margin, that they'd come back in a couple of years or 10 years. Anyone who comes back and tries to fund a pro-merger initiative for at least another generation would be foolish. The people of this community do not want to merge. They love their respective cities. They don't apologize for being from Lewiston and Auburn. And as you can see here tonight, we have a very enthusiastic and happy crowd.
Right on cue. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
It's a great night. Thank you.
Again, recap, no Lewiston-Auburn. It's Lewiston and Auburn to stay. And as you said, you hope for the next 100 years at this point.
Yes.
All right, Pat and Cindy, going to send it back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Christina.
Certainly was a decisive vote, though.
Let's bring in our News Center political analysts, John Richardson and Phil Harriman, to talk about some of these results tonight. First, casino question. You all said, now this probably doesn't have a shot. Did you expect at all, John, you were going to see a margin like this of over 80% saying no?
I thought that the question 1 would lose by a wide margin, but not this wide. I mean, if you think about how much money that was spent by those supporting question 1,
right,
probably north of $5 million, pales in comparison to the amount that was put in for opposition.
What's the biggest reason?
I think this has everything to do with the fact that all the questions were never answered that people had in their minds about this particular person and about this particular project. And I think the failure to step up and answer those questions head on, I think, cost him dearly.
Yeah, and Phil, never mind the questions that were being asked by legislators and ethics commissions looking into how this was funded. Just come out and say, we want to build a casino and here's why. And they never really said that.
They didn't, and I think that was to their detriment, among other things. It wasn't until in the last week or so that people were aware that this was actually a casino. I think it's also a testament to the questions that were raised about Sean Scott and his background. Many people, I'm sure, in the Bangor area are familiar with sort of the way that whole process, he got that on the ballot, got it passed, sold it for I don't know the
$51
number, $51 million in left town, and here he is again trying to cash in on the state of Maine. I think, just real quickly, and I know this is tongue-in-cheek, it's probably the first casino question that actually created economic development here during the campaign, that we don't have to have a casino to see the results.
He couldn't wait to get that in. But clearly, it seems to me in this particular instance, it was really all about Sean Scott. The opposition made this about Sean Scott. Sean Scott failed to come back and really answer the questions that were being asked of him, and I think that it lent credibility, if you will, into the whole idea of this shady Sean Scott character, and he could never recover from it.
Yeah, he came front and center, though, after having been kind of in the shadows during the whole signature process, having his sister kind of front the whole thing.
And I think because the numbers were showing it going against him, and I'm sure they had polls that were telling them that.
They did, and they knew that the Democrats were going against them. But I mean, testament to really as much money that was spent on this campaign, testament to Maine people that they saw through what they were being told and came to the conclusion that they did, which was not to support this for all the reasons that we've described.
The question that will have the biggest impact from tonight on is question 2, Medicaid expansion approved by voters after the legislature had tried to pass it and the governor kept vetoing it and they couldn't override. Phil, people will naturally be skeptical that this is going to stand as they passed it.
Well, it appears that it is on its way to passage, and it's probably the closest ballot question of the evening, which fuels the conversations to come. I don't know what we do if we're 2 or 3 years down the road and we see the repeat of what happened the last time we expanded Medicaid. I don't know where the political will is going to come from to once again back this down and say, the second time we made a mistake as well.
And it's hard to trust any numbers that anyone puts forward because you see what's happened in other states. Ohio, for example, they got far more people who proved to be eligible for their Medicaid expansion, and it ends up costing a lot more money.
It will, and it will cost some money, but there will be some savings in the long run when you have preventative health care for people who don't have health care at all. It ends up tending to save money in the long run, but you're going to have to absorb that cost, early on. I will say that, as Phil said, this is the closest election, right, of any of the referendum questions. 16 points is a pretty wide margin and a pretty strong referendum, but you asked the question, who would be opposed to this after the dust settles? I can think of one person. He sits in the Blaine House today, and that's Governor LePage. Will obviously have a say or attempt to have a say in how this law is enacted.
His argument has been all along, we cannot afford this. How much did having those income thresholds in the question on the ballot, $16,000 threshold for an individual, $22,000 for a family, how much of that do you think played into this doing so well?
Oh, I think that put it in a very easy to understand comparison relative to other voters who were in the ballot box today saying, oh, these folks are making half or a quarter of what I make. Sure, we should lend them a hand. But I think you also have to give credit to the organizers of Question 1. David Farmer was on earlier tonight with Don Kerrigan. He was able to say, that they had people all over the state. They had people who had voted. I think there was 50,000 votes before the polls even opened. Yeah. So that tells me it was a very well organized campaign.
Democrats were energized. Let's wrap it up. The Medicaid vote for many people was an emotional one. Clearly so was the Lewiston-Auburn merger vote, which has been soundly rejected. John, no surprise to you?
That is no surprise. I mean, I'm slightly surprised by how strong the numbers were, but I'm not surprised by the fact that it didn't pass. And as I said earlier, life is incremental. I think this was too much change for the two communities that have been divided for so long. There's pride in Lewiston. There's pride in coming from Auburn, and trying to put the two together without incrementally combining services, I think, is the reason for its failure.
You know what was surprising most to me was that this question even got on the ballot. The results tonight show that there was essentially very little support for this question, yet it got all the way to tonight's results.
True.
It seemed like there was support, though. I mean, the people who've been pushing this are so vocal, and they do make some rather eloquent points about, the potential savings of combining forces.
You make a good point. Community activists, to use a common phrase, people can create a lot of visibility and a lot of buzz.
But you had a lot of former mayors, people who all know how the cities work, who also said, yeah, we want this. There were some other mayors who did not, but many did.
This is an instance in which some of the thought leaders are way ahead of the rank and file, those who live in these communities, or perhaps way ahead. Either way, but yeah, they're just not in sync, if you will, with the people and what they were thinking. And sometimes you can get in love with your own idea and you don't go out and listen to the people, and you find out at the polls, in this case here on this referendum question, whether or not the merger would occur, that you just weren't listening well enough to the people.
All right,
and it seems like one other point, though, that it was not one city that killed this.
Yeah,
we looked at the numbers,
right.
and it really did appear that both cities equally said no, we do not.
Probably for the best.
Want this.
People will get along a lot better if they don't agree on it. And we want them all to get along.
Of course.
Sean, Phil, thanks so much.
Guys,
You're welcome.
thank you.
We will be back at 11 o'clock on the air on WCSH 6 and WLBZ 2.
Yeah, for now, thanks for joining us. We'll see you in a bit.